Start recording. Yeah. Hey everyone, good morning. Thanks for joining in. So my name is Raghav. I'm the founder of the Debate Club, and we've been doing this for the past, I think, about a couple of years now. And I think some of you may be joining in for the first time, so I'll give you like a little bit of an orientation of how this happens. And first, I want to tell you guys why we started the Debate Club. It's the Debate Club is more of a initiative to trigger bidirectional public discourse because it's very difficult to find a place where people can have nuanced conversation that goes both ways. You find people having intelligent conversations on YouTube, but that's a one-way broadcast, right? You don't get to participate; you just get to listen, consume. And I think that there needs to be a space for us to have this kind of like a bi-directional discourse where people who disagree with each other can come in and then have like a civil discussion that can, like give you perspectives on the other side of things. So we want to get like as many people as possible to come and contribute their perspectives and get to learn. And also, you get to learn about your own perspectives as you share it in a forum, right? So that was the initiative, and it's been going on really successfully. We do these weekly debates. It's technically called a debate, but it's more of an open discussion because we've tried doing more of like formal style debates where we have like two sides and people pick teams and they represent their point of view. But it since this is like um, you come in for the first time, there's not really much of a time for you to prepare. So what we ended up realizing is that like open discussion is much more constructive and much more feasible and requires a lot less logistical overhead. So it's going to be more of a open discussion. So how this will work is that we'll basically set the context on what the topic is, and then you have to like get in the queue. You raise your hand on Zoom. Basically, if you're new to Zoom, you have to like click on the reaction button below, and there's an option to raise hand. And once you get in the queue, we go in the order of who raised first, and you get to have like 5 minutes where you can present your point of view, and you can rebut other people's perspective. Always be respectful and be dispassionate as you're presenting your point of view. And so you'll get to speak. You'll get to have like 5 minutes of speaking time. And we have our host. Today's moderator is Puneet. He's just a volunteer for the club, and we're all like volunteer. It's a volunteer run community, right? So he'll be like moderating the session, and as you raise your hand, you get to speak, and after that, we can keep going around. So Puneet will be like guiding you guys on how things happen. Also, I think we have enough people now. So Puneet, if you can set the context in the topic and offer further instructions, that'd be great. And once again, thanks everybody for joining in.
Sure, Raghav. So, welcome everyone back to the debate club. So, today's topic is something which is very hotly debated all around the world. The West is supports democracy, while China supports alternative forms of democracy. Wait, Raghav, I'm getting a bit anxious. There are so many people I've never tried.
Hey, don't worry about. See, this is like a very informal session. I know that like a lot of other people who are coming in for the first time, they feel like anxious. Don't worry about it. We're just like it's a small group. If you think about it, if you walk into a room full of 10 people, it's all it is. Okay. So don't feel anxious. And I'm saying this for all of you guys. And Puneet is also like a new member in our community. So we since we're a volunteer-run community, we expect volunteers to come in and volunteer to host and moderate. So that's how this goes. Puneet, don't worry about it. Just go ahead, man. It, it's more about the topic than the people in it. So yeah, set up the context and let's get started.
Okay, so let's start with the supporters of democracy. Supporters of democracy say that democracy is based on the fundamental rights. There are two fundamental rights. First is the right to equality of political opportunity. In a democracy, anybody can be the prime minister or president, whether it is a poor, oppressed person or a rich person. And second, it is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that says The authority of the government is derived from the will of the people. Basically, that means that people have the right to choose what decisions affect them. And these two fundamental rights are consistent with democracy. This is not consistent with other forms like autocracy, dictatorship, or monarchy. Whereas opponents of democracy say that even though there is equality of opportunity, poor people, homeless people, and those who have been socially oppressed, especially in countries like India, cannot be expected to vote because they are illiterate. They are struggling to meet their basic needs. And then democracy looks good on paper, according to critics. But in reality, democracy is merely a popularity contest, according to them. Meaning, a person comes from a wealthy background, he has political connections, he belongs to a big party, whereas another person he is very educated, but he comes from a modest background. So, who will win the election? Most likely, the first person, unless the electorate is well informed. And second thing that critics argue is that this leads to demagoguery. Demagoguery means that the leaders try to instill fear in people, fear, hatred against other communities or other countries to stay in power. Like we see it happening.
बेस बहुत कम है वो उनके बेस बहुत परसेंटेज वाइज 1-2% ही होगा ना एक
I
दो
Hey
can
guys,
परसेंट
can you please mute yourself? The guys who are participating.
ये रिटर्न लेना है वो भी लेना है सर
please unmute yourself.
आपको अगर पीरियोडिक है ना ये
Yeah,
Okay.
Puneet, you should have the ability to mute others. I think it's Ankit. Ankit, can you please mute yourself? Yeah.
So yes, and demagoguery is basically, instilling fear in people, instilling hatred. Then we have communalism. Communalism is basically political religious leaders using religion to ask for votes. Vote for my religion, vote for caste. And this is very common in diverse countries and which have a history of communal past, especially like India. Whereas those who favor democracy say that democracy is more politically stable. It allows for peaceful transition of power. It allows accountability to the people. People can remove the government if the government turns out to be inefficient, corrupt. The example I gave of the leader the person who is wealthy, he can be removed by the people if he is corrupt. And also, the democracy serves the interest of the majority. It is said that monarchy serves the interest of the royal family, oligarchy serves the interest of the few, and democracy serves the interest of the majority. But critics say that democracy can turn into a tyranny of the majority, where majority's interest overpower concerns of minority. For this, supporters say that strong liberal guardrails are required and constitutionally guaranteed rights for minority is non-negotiable. Another positive of democracy is it is responsive to the electorate's changing demands. And also democracy intensifies more active participation of people in politics. If I know that the government is going to listen to my opinions, if they are going to listen to a community's interest, then people will protest, people will express their opinion and describe what they want. And also key organs of government institutions. If you look at countries that are democratic, they have more free press, independence of judiciary than autocratic countries. But let's take some places where democracy actually fails. I will give a quick shot, I guess it's getting longer. There is voter apathy, which means that voters are disinterested. They don't want to vote. Imagine a country where only 40% voters actually vote. Even in this, only if 51% vote for the government, then their government wins only 20.4% of the electorate's vote. Then is government really a representative of the majority's interest or just 20.4% of the electorate? That's the question. And then there are those who say that democracy is good, but we can go even ahead by mixing democracy with meritocracy. Meritocracy means that leaders should be elected based on their capability, proven track record, and integrity instead of popular votes. Epistocracy is like give the voters the right to vote, but give the educated voters more political power. Their votes should count more value than uninformed voters. So with this, I think I have given a balanced perspective. Those who would like to speak have to raise their hand. Yes. Mohammed, do you want to speak? You have raised your hand since a long time. Okay, Pramod, I will let you speak first.
Sorry. I just now I raised my hand. Sorry, I didn't hear it correctly. Yeah, I have raised my hand, but I don't have to go first. Should I go
Yeah,
right now?
Mohammed, can you unmute yourself and speak? Okay, I guess like Mohammed is having some issues. I think Pramod, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, number one, before I start, I would like to say that I'm very pro-democracy in general, but I want to keep this debate club interesting, and I feel that this is a relatively controversial topic. So, to keep this interesting, I'm going to be the devil's advocate today. And I might have to leave the meeting beforehand. So, I will put together multiple points at one go because I will not be able to participate at the rest of the meeting. So, the first thing that I would like to say is that I would like to contest the notion that democracy necessarily involves stable transfer of power because it depends upon the country and its circumstances. So, for example, traditionally in France, when the French Revolution had happened, they had removed a monarch and they had instituted a revolution and tried to bring in a democracy, but it led to dictatorship and the worst form of dictatorship we have seen in France's history. That is because sometimes, depending on if when there are multiple, neighboring countries that are sort of interested in inciting unrest within a country by supporting the rebel groups within the country for their own self-interest, and stable transfer of power is not possible. Sometimes autocracy is the most, practical and stable form of government that that particular country can experience. An example of this is Russia. We have also recently seen this in Afghanistan and Libya, where I'm not saying that the monarchies or the autocracies were good, but replacing them has often led to worse. Another example is Iraq. The reason is because, like I said, other countries tend to get involved and incite rebel groups. So if there is a stable monarchy, so I'm not going to say that every country that is functional today, that is a democracy, like a Western liberal democracy, we should convert it back to a monarchy. We can introduce elements of meritocracy. But if there is a functional, stable monarchy, don't try to replace it because there is a reason why it is there in the first place. Second thing is that democracy is not, one person, one vote, and it is not voter apathy. That is the reason why it is not one person, one vote. It is voter rational irrationality. This is a slightly different point from apathy. It means that it is not within my rational interest to inform myself politically if I know that I cannot influence the government alone. I would need a bunch of other people to form a lobbying group in order to be able to influence the government, because often the policies are not dictated by what majority want, but what a bunch of special interest groups want. And politicians often influence, one voter block, another voter block, another voter block. They don't try to take into account what individual voters want. And if an individual voter feels that they alone cannot change policy, then it is within their rational self-interest to not inform themselves of what is right. And this often is the reason why voters tend to remain steeped in, misinformation. So, for example, recently we've seen in US about how tariffs were implemented. Even though tariffs, according to most economists, literally benefit only the US businessmen at cost to US consumer. So US consumer is worse off because of tariffs. Similarly, immigration. US consumers in general tend to benefit from immigration. The only people who are at loss will be the high school graduates, according to research, who might lose jobs in selective areas. And that can be compensated by other benefits like employment benefits. But we will not have this discussion because most US voters are not sitting and opening ManQ, or they're not sitting and opening any economics textbook to even know whether what I'm saying is correct or not, because it is not within their self-interest. They have very little influence on policy. They can, and people have some inherent biases. You can call it, an anti-foreign bias. In general, like anything foreign is considered bad. So a bunch of special interest lobby groups can sort of appeal to those, irrationalities or biases within voters inherently, while propagating their own special interests. Another area in which democracy tends to, fall short is that sometimes you need power in terms of money to be able to, propagate for your own cause. And even people who have more money, there is evidence that their votes tend to count more. So if you look at a lot of, countries where women are not equally empowered, sometimes it is within the self-interest of monarchies to, allow more immigration or to give better rights to people. So yes, you won't have your free press. Yes, you won't have your, ability to speak out against the government. But what if the same government is allowing more immigrants into the country and is able to lift them out of poverty, and the country itself is growing better because of that? And what if it is giving women more rights? So, and the reason why monarchies end up like this is because immigration also sometimes the growth of a country might align with the interests of the monarchy ruling it. So they will implement whatever policy it takes to improve growth, and sometimes that does involve increasing women's participation or increasing immigrant participation, etc., etc., etc. And they're able to do this while keeping the country stable. A very good example is UAE, Qatar, Oman, and all of these, which are probably the monarchies are probably more liberal than people who live in that particular country necessarily, or people who would vote in that country necessarily. Even if the people who live are liberal, they might not have the monetary power to be able to implement the more liberal policies. So this is the 3 points.
Pramod, okay, you have a minute left. I was going to say, but yeah, there are a bunch of people in the queue. So. Okay, all right. Thank you. I think it was Aditya next, right?
Yeah, thank you. So even I'm against democracy for the most of the point. So democracy is only good if it's implemented properly. If it's not implemented properly, then the failure or the pain points of democracy would be greater than the benefits which it gains. So, for one example, it could be the various leakages because of the officials having bribes and basically having some sort of corruption. Then there could be the freedom of the press. We see that in India, even though India is supposed to be a democracy, the prime minister hasn't taken any press conferences in the past for 10 years or so, right? And so there was a point of the common people having the ability to participate and also become the prime minister or a member of the cabinet. But the thing is, not everyone is either interested or secondly is skilled enough to actually gain those positions, right? People can still win the elections because of other means, because of the other leakages in the elections in a democracy, but that doesn't mean they're the best qualified to do that. Also, they might not have the bigger picture in mind, and they might just try to win the votes by giving freebies and not really thinking about the long-term prospects. Democracy also isn't as stable as people would like to say. Some countries like the United States, they have been quite stable, but even the I would say even the more developed countries like the UK, for example, they have changed their prime ministers 7 times in the last 10 years. This is mostly because the people, they grow too impatient too quickly, and they're not letting the prime ministers work out the long-term vision. So after just 1.5 years, they try to change the prime minister when they see no results. But the thing is, the economic growth, that's gonna take like way more than 1.5 2 years, so that's one thing, right? And also, I think we should separate the notion of the form of government with the economic policies. So a good example could be Russia. So they also didn't have a democracy for the most part, but they were also communist. And because of communism, that they were not as prosperous as maybe China, because China, they embrace capitalism in select cities, and because of that, they grew by a huge margin, right? So I think this separation is also an important point which we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ditya. So I think it was Arjun next who had raised his hand. Arjun, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not totally against democracy. If the democracy is well maintained, then this is one of the best tool I feel in terms of managing and ruling people. Because on the flip side, if you look, authoritarian level or in dictatorship like countries, you cannot change the ruler. But in democratic system, you have the option to change the ruler if you don't like it. But by looking at China and other countries, we might feel, looking at the development and all, we might feel like because of their dictatorship, they are able to manage it well, like North Korea or any other country where they are following that. But if the ruler, if we want to change the ruler, if we don't like their administration, then we don't have the option. Maybe some rulers are good, maybe the following rulers may be bad. There we will not have the chance to change and oppose the rulers. But in the democratic system, we have the option to raise the voice. Yes, I agree, but in most of the cases, people will always find loopholes in the systems, irrespective of what kind of mechanism they are following. That can be democratic or dictatorship anywhere. Definitely, the greedy politicians or any leaders, they will definitely find some loopholes in that. They'll definitely crack it. So if people has a lot of power to change the ruler, then that's definitely a good advantage. If we have fixed all the problems in this democratic system, then this is the best system, I feel. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjun. And now, Swasti, you can go next.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Sorry.
I am saying that I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Okay, guys. Look, nobody is trying to sell democracy as a flawless or a smooth running machine. I agree it's very messy, and half the time when you are watching media or journalism, you might feel like that you're watching a room full of adults throwing tantrum on live television. But it's the only setup on earth that actually accounts for how terrible people can be when you give them power. Autocracies rely on the fantasy that you'll somehow get a wise, uncorrupt ruler who stays good forever. Democracy assumes that every leader is potentially a crook. So that's why we put an expiration date on them. Its biggest selling point is that when our leader ruins everything, we get to boot them out with a piece of paper instead of needing a bloody revolution. You don't keep democracy around because it's efficient or inspiring, right? There were a lot of points which were quite interesting for me, which my opponent made, and I would like to rebuttal them one by one. On, I guess Pramoda shared that there was one point of power and money democracy point. So I guess, sure, money in politics is infuriating, but in a democracy, a billionaire can spend a fortune and still watch their candidate lose on election night. In an autocracy, money doesn't just buy, you know, normal things. It's mostly it can also buy the army, the courts, and the entire state apparatus. So if you think money controls democracy, try running a company in an autocratic regime without paying off the dictator's inner circles and see how long you keep your assets. Also, on autocracies like the UAE or Oman granting women's right and open immigration, let's not mistake a monarch's mood swing for structural progress. When your freedom comes from a royal decree, they are more of like revocable gifts, right? The same king who hands out driving permits or work visas today can take them back tomorrow morning if he wakes up paranoid. So the real rights aren't handed out like my opponent mentioned. Okay. Also, that I totally agree with Arjun when he said that democracy only works if implemented properly. Right. No system on earth is ever implemented properly. That's a ghost story we tell in political science classes. Dictatorships require a morally flawless, brilliant supreme leader, a person who literally does not exist. Democracy is specifically built for broken implementations. It assumes human will mess it up. Though democracy works in implementation properly is more of like a theoretical thing, but when you are talking in reality, that's hardly the case. Also, that I forgot who was before me. I guess that okay. The first was Aditya, then it was Arjun, I guess, who said that when you think of China, who implemented this system of communism, you might think that they are better in this particular regime, and that's how it's kind of conflicting to come to a conclusion. So I think that China didn't succeed because of state control. When China lifted millions out of poverty, it didn't do so because centralized tyranny is a superior economic engine. It happened after 1978 when the government got out of the way, allowed market capitalism, and let its people trade. China's economic boom didn't come from, what we are debating over here is that authority or monarchy, etc. It was because they were given the economic freedom. Second, I would say that when a democracy messes up, citizens scream about it on television, vote the bad party out, and pivot. When an autocracy messes up, it hides the bodies, as we know in North Korea. So if you want to argue that Chinese culture requires an autocratic dictatorship for stability, look at Taiwan. They are just
Your
30
time
minutes,
is
please.
over. 30 seconds. Okay. Or 30
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah. So Taiwan shares the exact same language, history, and cultural rules, yet it is one of the most vibrant, high-tech, and prosperous liberal democracies on earth. So Taiwan proves every single day that you do not need to strip citizens of their dignity, privacy, and voice just to build a world-class economy. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Shirish, you can go next.
So I oppose few elements of democracy, not overall. The first argument I make is training few people or giving power to technicians who have knowledge on specialized field is easier than training overall people. I mean, in a small country, it is possible to make a ideal democracy where everyone is educated. I am talking about political education. Nowadays, education is already spreading, but political education is still uh, still still very few, and uh, training a larger country in a larger country, providing political education to everyone is difficult, as the topic of our debate is current situation, and in current situation political awareness is very less. And another thing is democracy is all about 51% of people. It is about 51% of people who voted, and they have no uniformity of thoughts. We cannot say right and wrong is decided by the 51% of people's vote, what they want. I mean, there is an example like in I am seeing 1 minute. Like in racial segregation and anti-mixing laws in 1890s to 1960s. State laws separated where whites were in the majority. They separated blacks from going to same school, boss, toilet, and marriage. So at that time, the majority suppressed the rights of minority. So the rights were actually right and wrong were decided by the majority of people, not by critical thinking or by uh, tech, technical analysis, but it was based on 51% of thought. So meritocracy or technocracy is I don't say it will replace democracy, but it should be included in democracy, because it could prevent from minority getting suppressed. And women's suffrage was also legalized in the past, because those who participated in voting were mostly even though women also have large population, but voting rights were provided to men and they were also suppressed due to the democracy only. And in parliamentary democracy where there is vote of confidence, vote of confidence, the PM has to do some corrupt activities to get confidence from his other ministers to be in power. So election cost and vote of confidence is also a disadvantage for democracy. I mean, it is not a fully unuseful system, but in smaller countries it is brilliant where political education is very better, where citizens can decide what is right or wrong. Well, citizens are already educated, but in current situation and in larger countries, it is not possible. So, training a few people and providing, and it is also that when like, we elected Narendra Modi as PM. So Narendra Modi does not know how to run the government by his own knowledge. He also takes the help of other people, and his only thing, his main thing he does is to decide, make the final decision. But the real work is done by uh, technical people. Technical people. So making a provision directly for them is better for also lowering the costs of government, which could be used for development activities. And one alternative of it, I suggest, is semi-constitutional monarchy. Although it cannot be practiced in all countries where monarchy was never the root, and declaring who would be king is not possible. So king often gets autocratic, so that's why democracy came in the eye. But semi-constitutional monarchy, few countries are practicing it, and it is a government. Well, king is provided some executive power where he can decide right or wrong, along with democratic practices. So no
Shri,
full power.
your
Time up.
5 minutes is done. If you take 30 seconds only, your 5 minutes is done. You can take 30 seconds.
So where monarchy was historical roots, there we can practice semi-constitutional monarchy where king holds power, some power of executive, where he can make some decisions, as well as with along with democratic practices. But while there is pure democracy, we can add meritocracy and technocracy. Thank you.
Okay. So Nihal, you can go next. And friends, please remember to speak within the 5 minutes limit.
And may I start?
Yes.
I am pro-democracy. And from what I have noticed, from what my peers think of democracy, they do not constitutionally understand what democracy stands for. Democracy is for the people, by the people, of the people. Okay. And the thing is, democracy trusts you. Okay. Trusts you to make changes in the system yourself because you are part of the government. Even though you may not hold any position in the government, you are a part of it. Your vote ensures who gets into the government, who runs the government. Your voice matters above everyone else. The thing is, what my peers are thinking is that you elect an official and you just forget about them for the next 5 years. No, you don't. You sit next to them, you constantly monitor what they're doing. Okay, that's what democracy stands for. You are as active as the government. You ensure that the government works for you and not for themselves. Okay, and India may be lacking in a lot of aspects. Okay, but India is a very massive country, it's a very diverse country. Moreover, I would like to point out to what my peer Pramoda said before in her speech. She was saying that the people of America are not that interested. They are not that political. But if you look at it, she has conveniently ignored certain facts. She has ignored the No Kings protest. She has ignored the ICE protests. She has ignored other kinds of protests that have happened in America, environmental protests and other kinds of protests. Okay, America is a capitalistic country, so there's a lot of lobbying. There's a lot of difference in their way of moving. Okay. And then the other form is that they have constantly been comparing China and Singapore. Okay, Singapore is not technically an autocratic state, it's a democratic state. However, the way the constitution is framed entrusts the ruling party, which is the People's Action Party, which was founded by Lee Kuan Yew, who was very authoritarian in nature, to ensure that Singapore can run without external influence, entrusts them with a lot of power. So the ruling party has never really changed in Singapore. Yet Singapore is very efficient in the way it works because it has done something very brilliant. It has ensured that the interests of the politicians align with the interests of the people. Their wealth are bound to something called as the sovereign wealth fund. So if the sovereign wealth fund does not perform, their wealth also shrinks. Okay, so it's a one-off example that Singapore thrives so well despite being an autocratic state. The other example of an autocratic state is China. China has a lot of issues if you look at it from a superficial glance. Oh, उनका GDP बढ़ रहा है, उनका ये बढ़ रहा है, ये बढ़ रहा है. Dude, the point is that they have subjected human rights to a very massive extent. Okay, and moreover, I would like to do a rebuttal to Shirish, who was saying before me. He was saying that only 51% of the people bring the change. No, it's 100% of the people that bring the change. Even if the people you do not elect become the opposition in the house, they constantly protest, they constantly scrutinize the people in power. Democracy is not just run by the people in power, but it's also run by the opposition. It is also run by the people. Democracy is a much more elusive model than any other model that we have ever seen. It does not entrust power into the hands of few who can use it as per their whims and fancy. It entrusts the power into the people to do it as they wish. And of course, the great lawyer Ram Jethmalani has said that अगर देश का नागरिक पढ़ा लिखा ना हो तो मालकी उतनी चल नहीं सकती. Basically, was saying that if the people are not that educated, okay, the country cannot perform. The government cannot outperform its average voter. Okay, and it's a much more systematical fault than a form of governance. The only education has to be improved to counter that. But again, there are a lot of democratic factors at play. Okay, but that's what democracy is. It entrusts you to the ability to bring change. It does not let you go off, oh, I cannot bring change.
Hello, Nihal. Hello. Are
Interact
you
with
done?
our peers. Hello.
Oh, yes, Nihal.
Yeah, I was asking, will there be a caucus for discussion?
Oh, yes, there will be rebuttal round.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mohammed Arfat, you can go next. Hello, Mohammed.
Good morning, respect sir. Today I want to speak about democracy really is not just why we call it. Democracy means that people have a meaningful role in government in their country. It is based on free and fair elections, freedom or expressions, equality, rule of law, independent institutions, accountabilities, and protection of citizens' rights. A truly strong democracy should not end after people cost their votes. Citizens should be able to question their leaders, express their opinions, access reliable information, and expect institutions to work independently and fairly. If we look at countries such as Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and New Zealand, we can see strong explanations of democratic institutions, transparency, political participation, and protection of civil liberties. These countries show that democracy is not only about choosing a government, it is also about how power is used after the government is elected. India has a democratic constitution, regular elections, political competitions, and democratic institutions. But there are also challenges that needs constitutional improvement, including corruption, political accountabilities, freedom of expression, institutional independence, equality, and political awareness among citizens. So when we talk about democracy, we should not simply ask whether a country has elections. We should look deeper at our citizens truly improved or institutions strong. Is every equal before the law? Can people question those in power and our leaders uniquely accountable to the people? In my view, democracy is not a certificate that a country receives once and keeps forever. Democracy is a constitutional responsibility. A country becomes more democratic when its citizens become more aware, its institutions become stronger, its leaders become more accountable, and every citizen feel that their voice and rights matter. Thank you, sir. It's also called a democracy.
Are you done? Okay, before I let Arjun speak, I will let all the first timers who are speaking for the first time, let them speak, okay? So Group 180, Harsha, you can go ahead.
Hello, guys.
Uh,
So, for me, democracy is not just important, it's essential to a free state. So, I mean, what's there in a country if there is no freedom? When people say everyone is not qualified to vote. So, but the question is, who gets to decide who is qualified enough to vote or not? Yes, as people said before, democracy can become a majoritarian tyranny in some cases. But that's why we don't have an absolute democracy. We have constitutional democracy to protect basic human rights for everyone, and free speech for everyone protected by law, where even the most minuscule minority can keep their voice. That cannot happen in an autocracy. So let's assume we gave power to the most educated. So if you think about it, that's what aristocracy was until monarchies ended. You know, the rulers, the monarchs, and the aristocracy around it were the most educated people in the past. But we all know how the poor were treated in the past. So ideals are much more important than education. Even today, we have bureaucracy to run the country and politicians to dictate them because it's the will of the people in the end. So, and let's talk about the examples. We have been given so much examples about Saudi and Qatar. They have money only because of oil money. They are not. They didn't become rich because of autocracies, and the reason they are tax free because they want to prevent unrest from people, not because they are. They are some utopian rulers who care about their people. So in Saudi and Qatar, you could get killed for talking against the dictator. Is this what we want? You know, uh, as others said before, China has only become an economic powerhouse after Deng Xiaoping came in. And if you look at the history of China, we all know how many millions died under Mao Zedong. So for a Deng Xiaoping or a Lee Kuan Yew or an Ataturk, you're risking a Kim dynasty or an Idi Amin or even Hitler. So democracy does have flaws. No one's ignoring it. But when you say that you can't trust the average voter because they may vote for money or something, right? What's the alternative? Are you okay with trusting an autocrat and expect that he will be fair to everyone? I guess that's more of a fantastical idea than trusting the voter. You know, coming to revolutions, it's been said that we talked about French Revolution and the revolutions in Iraq that led to autocracies that were worse than before. That's true. But because when you remove an existing institution without any plan and to say, I mean, without any plan to replace it with a more stable institution, that's what you'll end up with. So that's not a point of democracy or autocracy. That's not about having a plan. Let's talk about the Iranian Revolution. The Shah was autocratic. You removed it, but you didn't plant democracy there. If Iran had been a democracy, it would have prospered. But you replaced it with another autocracy. So in the end, we are all against autocracy. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. So Adishri Kale, so you can go next.
Yes, hello. I am going to take a very pro-democratic stance today. I would first like to start by defining exactly how do we define a regime as democratic. Democracy is when you have a regime where a citizen can participate in the voting process, where you have competing political parties who can contest the elections, whether you have a key opposition which has institutional safeguards when it challenges the government, and whether citizens have rights to different sources of information and when they themselves possess the authority to contest the decisions taken by the ruling parties. The key distinction between a democracy and an autocracy is whether you have rules that the government passes that can be challenged or not. Opposition is an integral aspect of this difference. In a democracy, opposition is not treated as a threat to the state. It is a part of the system, as we have in India itself. Today, a lot of the rights that we as citizens of the country practice are all built on different democratic safeguards that were put in place long ago by our forefathers. Uh, in our country, we have an opposition that can expose failures. We have journalists who can investigate. Even though the government today is imposing different crackdowns on journalists, that does not change the fact that a journalist can still speak up in through different means available. Citizens have the right to protest. Courts are there who can intervene, especially when the government exceeds its political authority. We have legislatures, and when we have the freedom to dissent and protest against incorrectly ruled judgments or decisions or actions. A democracy basically protects dissent. If I take historical examples from all over the world where dissent has been suppressed, if I start with the 1988 Tiananmen massacre, if I start with authoritative regimes like Iran, in China, the suppression of the minorities like the Uyghurs, Myanmar, which has a very, very military regime where the Rohingyas have been persecuted, there is no institutional means for any opposition to challenge the power of the ruling party. Now, there are different ways in which a regime can be judged. Number one is state capacity. Number two is the protection of civil liberties. I do acknowledge that in autocracies, you do have situations around the world where you have autocratic governments that have accomplished extremely good state prowess. For example, Russia, China, and to some extent, Singapore. However, these are countries that rank extremely low in the protection of civil liberties and humanitarian rights of the citizens. As a country, it's our choice as a citizen to determine what trade-off we are willing to accept, whether we are willing to accept the loss of our personal rights just simply for state growth. A balance needs to be struck no matter what government we are in, and democracy, that is where the power of democracy is best exemplified. We in a democracy, you can implement a safeguard especially when there are mistakes, whereas in autocracy you do not have that liberty. Like any kind of power is centralized around the ruler, and any threat to the ruler is perceived as a threat to the state. That difference of distinction between ruler and state is what makes authoritarian regimes so dangerous for to enable flourishing of human societies. In democracies, you do not have this danger. At least it is not as evident as it is in other countries. I just want to end by saying autocracies can sometimes outperform any democracy, especially in governance. But the supreme point of democracy is that when a ruler is wrong or is corrupt or is incompetent, democratic mechanisms give the citizens the power to replace them, to question them, to criticize them. Further, any citizen today has any kind of citizen rights, has adult suffrage, has got rights to property, to expression, to freedom, etc. Simply because democratic mechanisms give us that liberty. And since we exercise them at length, even in our own country, I think that we should, acknowledge that democracy, no matter how much it is criticized today, is very, very important given the current situation around the world. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Atishri. Next is Venkat. You are speaking for the first time. Venkat, go.
So the topic of today's debate is democracy the best form of government among the available alternatives? The question I wanted to ask was good or best from what standpoint? Is it economic development? A developing country like India, for a developing country like India, the most important thing is economic development, and any political system has to be judged on the basis of whether it's delivering economic development. So I would like to quote Lee Kuan Yew, the ex-prime minister of Singapore, who said that for developing countries, discipline is more important than democracy. Countries like India have pretty basic issues, like public spitting, for example. Under our current system, if a leader cracks down on that, people will vote them out. The people will vote for leaders who promise to leave them alone with their bad habits, right? So, that's one example. What it means is that the people of India, people of a developing country with the level of education that exists in India, and with inherited bad habits like these, cannot really be trusted even to vote in their own interest. And the reason is, so the reason the system fails is because of democracy, a combination of the people's will and democracy. 70 years after independence, half of India's population is on government assistance of some kind. It could be food subsidies, freebies of various kinds. So a lot of what people vote for, which a lot of policy reflects, it just implements a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the deprived classes, people who are unable to support themselves in one way or another. One argument that has been made repeatedly by several speakers is that democracy guarantees freedoms, especially freedom of speech. So again, I wanted to question that. Do we in fact have freedom of speech in India? You cannot say anything that hurts the sentiments of a group of people, right? It will cause a lot of controversy. You may be forced to retract your statements. If you criticize a leader in public, you may be forced to apologize in public. So in other words, in India, you have freedom of speech as long as you don't say anything controversial or as long as you don't discuss any important topic. Do Indians as a people, do the citizens of India believe in freedom of speech? I think they believe in freedom of speech until they hear something that they don't like. Then they stop believing in freedom of speech. So the way the democracy is actually practiced in India, we seem to have the worst of both worlds. We don't have the freedoms that are taken for granted in Western democracies, and we don't have the state efficiency that exists in China. So regardless of the theoretical benefits of democracy, I think democracy, the way it's practiced in India, is a broken system. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. Next, Namashri Mahadev. Hello, Namashri Mahadev.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's after so many after a couple of years I have participating. So excuse me if I did something wrong. I just want to express my opinions. Nothing controversial. So few years back, a new nation conceived in liberty, a group of people resolved that government of the people, by the people, and the people, and for the people is a good governance model uh, for managing the authority entrusted to the group. So that's how democracy has come into the picture, as far as my knowledge. So entrusting the authority to the people so that they can elect the leader and form a 4 pillars of government to run on its own. So the question whether democracy is contemporary relevant or not, and do you accept the power of morally and ethically and legally? In my personal opinion, if we take India is a vast country and there are multiple spheres of aspects in it. For example, when freedom came to India, when India got its independence in 1947, 1 out of 11 women were literate. If we see now, but why I'm telling it, the system, the governance model which has been institutionalized since then has many flaws and positive outcomes as well. But still, fighting hurdles are illiteracy, false prestige, social taboo, and other like Venkat said, public spitting, open urination. There are many things that needs to be uh, or reformed. But in my personal opinion, with the initially there were like we were a group of people and we it was self-rule. But with the advent of globalization, the 1991 this act, advent of globalization, the money movement between the world and different currencies. If you see, Indian governance model has turned it into its own enemy, in my guess, because for reaching a consensus, we will have to wait for a lot of time, and for that, if you see China and other countries, so they are manufacturing things. If we see textiles, all the small, even minute particle of textile we import from China. So but we are not able to make India. We were not able to make India with this governance model. It has even in IT also. It's just a service sector to many product-based companies all over the world. So with more demographic dividend now, there was an administrative lapse in this governance model. So how do we take it further in this overhaul of this democracy? That's what in my personal opinion, democracy, demos and kratos, authority entrusted in the people is a good governance model. But in the contemporary terms, in the information age, when everyone has their own rights to express, fundamental rights comes with fundamental duties. So once there must be some stringent regulations that needs to be performed in democracy to be acceptable form of governance, so that there will be appropriate implementation of fundamental duties before we perform the fundamental rights. So I hope that will be a concrete, and that will give the democracy system a concrete and visible change, like this thing. Yes, hoping we will enjoy the fruits of that change. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Namashri Mahadeva. So now I will let Arjun speak, but now onwards it is 4 minutes, okay? After Arjun, Swasti, and Harsha, we will go for rebuttals. Wait. Advita wants to speak something. Advita, are you sure? 5 minutes then for you.
Wait, I thought I'd be going after the current speaker.
Your choice if you want to go after Arjun.
Then I'll go after the current speaker. Thanks.
Okay. Arjun, you can go.
Yeah, I want to highlight few points. I believe most of the participants are aware of it. So we most of the time compare with China and Singapore, stating like China also has China is also equally populated like India. How China is growing so fast, though both countries have started from the same stage, like extreme poverty. So for this, I want to highlight one point. I don't know like how many of these participants are aware of it. Like in China, we know that it's an authoritarian country system, but the main reason for the development is not because like they are open for foreign investments and all. This opening their country for the foreign investments also happened because of lot of resistance from the people, because of extreme poverty under Mao's rule. There was like extreme opposition. Because of that, they opened their economy and they encouraged the capitalism. And one more reason is, in the entire country, they own the land. The government owns the land. In India, like we own the land. So to build anything in India, to give land permissions to any corporate companies out foreign companies also, we have to take a lot of permissions, because people have the right to oppose the government's rules. They can go to high court or supreme court, anywhere they can challenge that. So here, to get the land, it's very difficult in India. And on top of that, in India, it's a federal system. Central government and state government both has different powers. So if central government comes with some development and infrastructure development, then there will be a lot of opposition if the state government is under a different party. And also, people don't give the lands easily. But in China and in Singapore, every land is under the control of government. People may own, they gave it for the lease like for 70 years to 100 years. After that, they own the land, they decide what to build, how to build, whether it should go vertically or horizontally. Everything is decided by China government or Singapore government in their countries. Not like India. In India, everyone has their own freedom. So whatever development that we are seeing in China and Singapore, it's coming at the cost of freedom. So our country has valued the freedom. That's the reason we are seeing the slow development. And also, we have the federal system. It's not easy to implement anything. Now, to the point one of the participants highlighted regarding the freedom of speech, are we really have the freedom of speech? Yes, definitely. But definitely we have the challenge to express our opinions. We are really scared. But this is not just confined to our country, or it's not the problem of the democracy. This happens anywhere. Let's forget about the system. Even if we take in an office or any college, we are scared to because when we express our opinion, there will definitely be an opposition for that. No one will accept whatever we say. Everything will be opposed whatever we say. It's not like everywhere people will just accept whatever we say, just move forward. It's not possible anywhere. So this happens, we shouldn't be worried about that. We should not worry about the consequences. If we feel right and if we say in a respectable way, then definitely it will reach. And last point I want to highlight is, here are we taking the accountability in India? Like if we say like infrastructure is very bad and no, system is completely broken, are we raising the problems here? Like when we raised problems for this education policy, we are able to bring down the education minister. Similarly, if we raise for healthcare, hospital system, if we take accountability and if we are aware, then definitely we can make the change we want. Yeah.
Thank you, Arjun. So now, Advaita, you can speak. You have 5 minutes because it's your first.
Okay. The main problem with democracy, I wouldn't say is anything with the structure itself. Rather, the problem is how difficult it is to maintain. It requires the institution to restrain itself. It requires civilians to actively participate in it. And it requires strict monitoring of policies. You need an educated this populace. This means you need strong institutions that are not as susceptible to corruption or bias. And I don't believe that India is exactly capable of all of these, or any country. It's very difficult to maintain in total, especially if a country is starting from, say, is a developing country, or say over 100 years ago or 50 years ago, when even countries like China and India were not in the best of situations. The main problem with democracy is how easy it is. It can turn into majoritarianism or mob culture. For example, agitation from external factors, like for example, war or conflict, geopolitical tensions. These can all agitate people, the civil population, which makes them extremely vulnerable to politicians using pathos, using emotional appeals to manipulate voters and play vote bank politics. In India, we play vote bank politics with, say, caste or religion. We have most often seen. It is very difficult to regulate a population under such agitations, especially if there are tensions or extreme.
Swasti, please mute yourself.
Sir.
An example of majoritarianism is basically when just 51% of the population can overthrow literally anything. What our democracy is based on constitution. The vote cannot overthrow absolutely anything. We still have things like human rights. We have strict constitutional laws that cannot be broken. The problem with pure democracy is that it allows for anything to happen and majoritarianism to take over. The problem is how difficult it is to maintain democracy in its current state, which is why you could argue that autocracy is perhaps better. It is simply top-down control. It ensures that such complications of falling into maybe a dictatorship, worst case, is not possible. And we've seen from success stories like Singapore and China that maybe an autocracy would be better. But the problem is these autocracies are also linked to really destructive and bloody pasts. Singapore, not as much, but China had the Cultural Revolution, I believe in the 1960s, which involved temples being destroyed, paintings being defaced, priceless artifacts being lost and destroyed forever. Not to mention the killing of the older population, literally. There were students that had indeed killed their own teachers who report their own parents for shooting to be killed later on. Now, something important is when a democracy is still developing or actively trying to repair itself to maintain democracy, it is, of course, going to fail. There are going to be lapses in judgment, which is where the civil population must and absolutely must be politically aware and correct the government through means of protest or whatever means is there for the population to speak. The problem is things like political apathy are extremely easy to sort of implant into newer generations, or a sense of learned helplessness among people, or fear based on past events or some collective memory of traumas that happened before. For example, in the USSR, many people who fled Russia are now absolutely terrified of the mention of the word socialist, not communist, just socialist. And despite whatever statistics there may be, whatever the policies there may be, that population of refugees who had experienced what the USSR had done, their logic is overridden and they fall for the Red Scare. In the case of where democracy fails, for example, a modern example would be in the case of Umar Khalid. I think most people have heard of it. A political activist from JNU who was imprisoned in 2020 and in Tihar jail. It's been 6 years and he's not even been given a court trial yet. The thing is, some people argue that he's involved in the Delhi riots in 2020 September. Therefore, he may not deserve a trial or something like that. The problem is this should be proven in court. No, it is even if people argue that the court giving Umar Khalid a trial in court means that if he is a terrorist, if he is a bad actor, then this gives him the opportunity for bail or to be unrightfully freed and cause terror upon the country. But isn't this to be proven in court? If there is a failure of law in our governmental systems, does it give the government a right to bypass all of this legislation and just act as they please?
Sveta, your time is over. You can take 30 seconds maximum.
My main point is, as the largest democracy in the world, there are, of course, going to be many struggles. But it's the duty of the people and of whoever is, and of our own government, of course, to ensure we maintain democracy. The main problem is difficulties in doing that. Yeah. Thank
you. Thank you. So, Swasti, please go ahead. 4 minutes, Swasti.
Yeah, okay. So my opponents have spent the last few minutes painting a very pretty picture of hybrid regimes, prediction markets, and autocratic efficiency. But please, let's stop romanticizing blueprints on paper and look at how power actually behaves in the real world. First, Shirish suggested that we try a semi-constitutional monarchy or maybe feudarchy, where experts bet money on policy. Let's call a semi-constitutional monarch what he actually is. A dictator wearing a fancy crown. Look at Jordan. Okay, when gas prices spike, public anger hit a wall because you cannot vote out a king. As for feudarchy, handing state policy over to expert prediction markets turns governance into a casino. No one would want that. hedge funds will gladly drop $100 million on a bet to push through a tax break that nets them $2 billion. And the moment you introduce competency tests for voters, history repeats itself. Just like Jim Crow literacy tests, those tests will be designed by whoever hold powers to franchise the working class and political people, right? Second, Muhammad argued that true democracy requires perfect transparency, strong institutions, and hyper-aware citizens, citing places like Norway. But claiming democracy only works under flawless conditions is a cop-out. Government has to work for real people as they exist today, not for any political science majors. Even the system relies on executive dominance rather than raw accountability, as my opponent mentioned. Citizen awareness isn't enough. Look at Sri Lanka's 2022 collapse. Citizens were deeply aware and took to the streets by millions in the Argala movement, if I'm pronouncing the name right. But because executive power was locked in, public responsibility couldn't stop the economy from burning down before it was too late. Finally, to the claim that India has the worst of both worlds, lacking Western freedom and Chinese efficiency, this completely misses why democracy exists. China is over 90% Han Chinese under a single party apparatus. India is a subcontinent of 1.4 billion people across dozens of languages, ethnicities, and religions. If you tried running India with Chinese-style top-down authority, the country would fracture into civil war within a week. Democracy is the only reason a landmass as diverse and India stays united. And that Chinese efficiency, it builds high-speed rail, but it also builds empty ghost cities and massive real estate crashes because no one has the courage to tell the supreme leader no. In contrast, look at India's 2024 election. 642 million voters walked up to the ball-out box, humbled predicted supermajorities, and forced coalition governance overnight. So, that's why I wanted to also, there's one last rebuttal that I wanted to point out, that if you take autocracy like China and Russia or Egypt, you won't think of Tihar jail, or you won't wait 6 years in Tihar jail for a trial. They disappear into secret black sites overnight. They are stripped of their legal representation and their names are scrubbed from search engines entirely. The fact that we know his name, debate his bail hearings, and criticize state prosecution in open forums is proof that public democratic sphere is alive and fighting. That's it, I rest my case.
Thank you. Now next, Harsha Srinath. Harsha, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm going to put my point on the broad democracy. So we give the example of Singapore all the time, but we have to remember that Singapore is a city-state which ended up as the transport hub of the world, whose population is 1/4 of that of Delhi. So India is a subcontinent with 20% of the world population. So China is also populated as India, but around 90% of its population is Han Chinese. So it makes an enormous difference. So we always hear autocracy as an alternative, but we never hear how it will come into existence in the first place. So people mentioned Lee Kuan Yew multiple times. Lee Kuan Yew always stayed power through elections, came into power through democracy. Do you want an army to march into the capital and a military leader take power? And people mentioned that Indians may learn more discipline in an autocratic regime, but on the cost of what? So why do we assume that an autocrat will instill discipline in people rather than proliferate his power? So India doesn't have absolute freedom of speech, as people mentioned. India has limits on freedom of speech. There is a failure of law, but it's because of the lack of democracy and not the other way around. And the most important thing is that we are comparing autocratic utopia to flaws of democracy. So the good parts of an authoritarian regime are not because of restrictions, but despite of those restrictions. So democracy has its flaws, nobody's ignoring that. But autocracy is not the solution. Because when you don't have an informed populace in a democracy, you end up with a bad economy, perhaps. But when a dictator is not a messiah in an autocracy, you end up with a holocaust. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now let us move to rebuttals. Rebuttals will be of 3 minutes where you can counter the other's point or you can state your own questions. So as I have raised the hand first, so I will go first. I will set a timer for myself for 3 minutes. Just wait for. Yes, so I set a timer for myself for 3 minutes. My first thing is, suppose 70% of voters in, take example, India, are illiterate or uninformed. They vote for religion, they vote for caste. But let's say the 30%, 20% of them are educated, they are informed, they make the correct choices by taking active effort and participating in politics. But the truth is that these 20% of the popular voters, after one time, realize that their efforts are going waste. They don't get any benefit or any results from this. How? Because the rest 70% of them, they vote for religion, caste, or any person, and they get their way. So government is elected by the 70% because obviously democracy is ruled by majority. So these 20% of the voters, they give up. They say ki there is no point of doing this, so they stop taking efforts. And this actually happens. I think this is called a free rider problem. I think there is a dilemma between those who are going for democracy. In democracy, you allow everyone to speak, but then those who are educated voters, they also have a right to get competent governance, to be protected against incompetent politicians, right? Because they are taking efforts from the end, but they are not getting any results because of the vast mass of uneducated and uninformed voters who choose the wrong people. So what do we do then? Some say that meritocracy is the option. Meritocracy is basically electing people based on merit. Like in China, there are some, like even in India, you have civil services where you choose bureaucrats based on a written exam. So maybe we should have it for politicians as well. Whereas opponents of meritocracy say that people should have a say, and if people don't have a say in decision making, then meritocracy distracts or diverts from the fundamental right of people should have the right to have a say in the governance. And also, after people become elected, these experts, they can also abuse their power. Who will hold them accountable? They cannot be removed by the people. That's a problem. But then there is epistocracy as well. Epistocracy says that all voters should get political power to vote, but voters who are more educated should have more political power than uninformed voters to vote. This means that there is an incentive to, educated voters. But I think there is a dilemma between giving everyone the right to vote versus, the right of the educated voters to competent politicians because they are taking effort. So yes, with this I will conclude my. If anybody has to say anything, they can say. Okay, so my point is over. Who was the next? I think it was Venkat. Venkat, you can go 3 minutes for you, everyone.
Yeah, I wanted to address a point that Swasti brought up, which is fairly important, but I believe it has the potential to derail the discussion. The point was that it's only democracy that enables India to be to cohere as a country. I agree with that. I think that's profoundly true. But the topic of the discussion is whether democracy is the best available system. If the coherence of a country is the only criterion that is used to judge a political system, then yes, democracy is the best system for India. But if you look at other criteria like economic development and the country becoming richer, more prosperous, and so on, then I have my doubts. But so I was looking at the question from a narrower standpoint. But I do agree that the coherence of democracy has been an essential element in the coherence of India. Another person, I think Arjun, made the point that people coming out on the streets and forcing the resignation of the education minister is an example of democracy working. I completely disagree with that, and so did Dr. Ambedkar, by the way. In his speech unveiling the constitution, he said that the Gandhi method of protest has unfortunately accustomed Indians to the notion of people coming out on the streets, millions of people coming out on the streets as something normal. It had to be done during British rule because they did not allow any other means of protest. No constitutional means of protest were allowed. But once India adopted a constitution and became a democracy, people coming out on the streets should stop. The way that people express their will should be through elections and their elected representatives. The elected representatives should express the will of the people in parliament and be listened to. So what is missing in India is the government actually engaging in a dialogue with the opposition and trying to bulldoze bills through parliament with no dialogue whatsoever. And so when the people feel that their voice, most of the time it may be okay because the issues involved are not so important. But where the issue involved is something important, as in the case of the paper leak, public anger boils over and people start coming out on the street in their thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands. It also happened in the case of the farmers' bills in Punjab. These are examples of the failure of democracy because of the failure of the government to engage with the elected representatives of the opposition. They should not be glorified as democracy working, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Venkat. So next, Nihal.
I would like to I would like to refer to Venkat again. The thing is that Dr. Ambedkar also said educate, agitate, organize. Okay. I agree to the fact that we should not be protesting over every minor thing. The thing is, the constitution gives us the right to organize in peace because sometimes the politicians do not listen to us. Okay, and that's why the protest was so important. There might have been other factors at play, but the thing was the opposition itself did not take the bill until the very end when things had extremely boiled over. They just came to take the malai out of the mill. Moreover, the meritocracy thing that you were talking about. And the thing is, meritocracy is a myth because where does merit arrive from? Merit does not only arrive from pure intellect or pure capability to perform something, but it also arises from the fact what your background is, what privilege were you born with, okay, and other things that factor in. That's why if you look at the Indian judiciary itself, most of our justices are related to each other somehow. So meritocracy is a myth that the privileged sell to the other privileged. It does not exist in its own totality. And especially a country like India, which has suffered so much suppression, not only by the Britishers, but also within themselves. Meritocracy cannot exist. I agree with the fact that reservations are not necessary, and this might derail the topic. Okay, but you cannot have meritocracy in India. And the fact of democracy is it gives something, what separates democracy from any other system of governance is that it gives the people a chance at redemption. It gives the people a chance to bring the change. And I agree, there are very massive things that India needs to change. Okay, but it is a slow, gradual process because democracy is a slow cog in the machine. Autocracy is very fast. It might bring you results. But at what cost are those results? I would like to ask my peers who believe, autocracy is the better thing. See, I agree. Our politicians are stupid. They do not represent the will of the people. They are greedy pigs, in my opinion. Okay, and that does not mean democracy is wrong. It just means the people do not have options. Our nota is systematically and arbitrarily diffused. Nota does not have any value. Okay, it does not point a failure to democracy. Democracy is a system, and India has adopted it in its own manner, in its own way, and it can be flawed that. But looking at the bigger picture, I believe the burden of proof to prove that autocracy is better than democracy lies on my peers. And the thing is, there was one more thing that the Umar Khalid case was brought up in the charts. It is a whole different case in itself. And I have explained that 5 of the 7 were given bail. Again, it is a special case where Umar Khalid has to prove it to the court himself that he's innocent, that his speech did not meant to incite the people. And if he's unable to do so, the government can remand him without any given period. And it's a very, very unique case in itself. And yeah, that's what I would like to ask my peers. What makes, and in cases of China, Russia, they do not go to jail, they just disappear. So I would really like to ask you, because I think the only autocratic states that I have heard them talk about is China and Russia, and they have completely ignored North Korea, Brunei, and all these other nations out of the oblivion.
Your time is over. You can
Yeah.
start completing
No,
this.
I am done. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I give it to Arjun, I would like to say that if you all have some similar arguments, like the same points, then you can avoid speaking, because otherwise we need new arguments, right? New points to speak. And also anybody can bring alternatives like meritocracy, aristocracy. So yes, Arjun, go ahead.
I just have to add one line. So if we are saying like if education system fails in our country, we are saying democracy failed. It's just a system. The people in that in that democracy system are failing, not the democracy system itself. It's because of the people. It's not because of the system. If the people are good, then this is the most supportive system ever. So I don't think people coming out of streets is a failure of the system. Because uh, the opposition from the people can come from anywhere. So people has to come out if they don't like anything. Because of that reason only in China, Mao has started opening the economy. So that is the most important thing. Whether the country is democratic or it's an authoritative, people should come out if they don't like anything. Yeah.
Okay, Advaita, go ahead.
I actually wanted to address what Puneet had brought up about meritocracy and talked about the efforts of, say, 30% of an educated populace being wasted. First of all, I'd say the efforts of that 30%, educated 30% versus, say, for example, in this theoretical situation, the uneducated 70%. Couldn't we say that effort translates into persuading other groups as well to break that barrier of educated versus uneducated? Not to mention, as 30% of a population, they definitely do have the right to protest. And if this really is a democracy, their voice would definitely be taken into account. That's the entire point of a democracy and not a one majority rules all, I assume. Then, of course, the economic power of the middle class and the upper class is, of course, greater. The middle class, especially, they both have majority and economic power. It's been shown time and time again that they can be brought together to incite extreme change. For example, the recent CJP protests. However, I do agree with Venkat that Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation doesn't mean as much. It did weaken the BJP. It was a point against them. However, it should be pointed out that this was a largely symbolic gesture. Dharmendra Pradhan has been replaced already by Prahlad Joshi, if I'm correct, who, according to the opposition, was linked to the release of 11 men in a related gang rape case. So it shows that what actual change or power do the people actually have in a democracy if people can so easily be swayed by just these symbolic gestures? How come actual policy change isn't being enacted, and how exactly in a democracy can you show that proper policy change will be enacted towards the people through governmental change, and to ensure people won't just be swayed by platitudes or whatever generalization? Also, one more thing, the idea of giving the educated 30% more rights to vote or more power. In fact, the idea of a meritocracy or giving anyone power based on a metric like wealth or education, doesn't this mean that these aspects will be politicized? For example, you could degrade the quality of municipal schools or and so on to ensure that the education levels or the impacts on the lower class or on the majority of people is lesser. You could use coaching institutes and whatnot to restrict the level of education a child has, to restrict the opportunities they have to certain classes, to even certain families, maybe. So I think all of these need to be taken into account. And of course, the most important thing of all, whether it's a meritocracy or an autocracy or a democracy, it's important if to distinguish what a government says they are versus what they are in practice, I'd say. The reason I
Ashwin, your time is over. You can take 15 seconds.
Yeah, my main point is just that what a government says they are, whether it's autocracy, democracy, whatever, is very different from what they are in practice. And it's very important to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Okay, Swasti.
Yeah, 4 minutes. Right. So I found Venkat's points really interesting, so I would love to rebuttal them. So
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. Okay. All right. He stated that on-street protests are more of like a failure of democracy. He gave example of paper leads and farmers' protests. Very well, but when a government ignores dialogue and bulldozes bad laws, peaceful public protest is the safety net working. In North Korea, when state decisions fail the people, citizens eat pre-bark during famines because protesting means death for 3 generations of your family. I hope you have heard it. In Iran, when women hit the streets to protest basic rights, the regime responds with live ammunition. Citizens marching in the streets and forcing bad ministers to resign shows the public still holds the final leash on power. You, I guess, misquoted Dr. Ambedkar on of the street protest. Like you stated that Dr. Ambedkar called street protest a failure, or I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, but Ambedkar called unconstitutional methods the grammar of anarchy, specifically because he gave us constitutional avenues like voting governments out to replace mob violence. But Ambedkar also warned that if constitutional remedies are blocked by a government refusing dialogue, popular pressure keeps leaders accountable. Using Ambedkar's word to argue for silent submission actually twisted his vision. So also you also mentioned, I guess, that national coherence isn't enough to prove that democracy is the best system. So look at Yugoslavia. It looked unified under a dictator, but the second the strong man died, the country exploded into ethnic genocide and broke into pieces. In Myanmar, the military junta tried to force national unity through gunpoint, triggering a brutal, endless civil war. I guess Advita also mentioned that political changes are just symbolic gestures, and replacing one corrupt politician with another shows people have no real power. So I think when bad decisions happen, like controversial reminiscence or terrible appointments, democracy allows citizens, journalists, and legal activists to take the state to court and overturn them. Look at if I'm right, Bilkis Bano case. Yeah. So when the Gujarat government granted premature release to 11 convicts, the citizens and activists didn't just accept it. They challenged it all the way to the Supreme Court of India, which flatly quashed the remission order and sent those men back to the prison. So I think yeah, this is not your typical symbolic. This is something real, legal, self-correction that only exists within the democracy. You know, in North Korea, when government official commits horror, oppress citizens, or abuse power, there's no public debate, no media outcry, no replacement of ministers, and zero legal recourse.
Oh,
The
yes,
resign
Swati.
doesn't need to offer
Okay,
symbolic
20 seconds
gestures.
maximum.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Venkat, you can go next.
Yeah, I cannot overemphasize the fact that the necessity for public protests is a failure of democracy, because it is not true that. So, we had the opportunity to do public protests during the British era, and massive public protests, thousands of people coming out on the streets, forced the British government to change some of their policies. Was the British rule of India a democracy? So, if we have to come out on the streets to change government policy, what is the difference between British rule and what we have today? I would really like everyone, including Swasti, to think about that. The other point I wanted to make is that, first of all, and I should clarify that I do believe in democracy. So, the debate I'm engaged in is an attempt to improve democracy. And one of the things that we have to think about is whether a given population is ready for democracy. At the time of so Lee Kuan Yew again said that democracy actually works well when you have a large middle class, which is the majority of the population, which is fully literate and properly employed. And the process of getting the country to that state has to predate democracy. He's not a statesman whose word we can take on everything, but this was his view. At the time of independence, at the time of our first election in 1950, 80% of India's population was illiterate. Was the country ready for democracy then? That's what we should think about. Also, there is, again, these are questions, right? I'm not pretending that I have all the answers, but these are questions that we must ask. And there have been other proposals about the franchise in a democracy. For example, there's a book on representative government by John Stuart Mill. And one of the proposals that he made was that anyone who is unemployed for 5 years or more should lose the right to vote. The logic being that if you cannot support yourself, then you should not be allowed to make decisions for others. Is such a rule susceptible to abuse? Probably. But again, something for us to think about. So I think that democracy for India is probably the best that we can come up with. But there is a huge amount of room for improvement, and we should all be thinking about ways to improve it. Thanks.
Thank you, Venkat. So now it's already 12:40, 1 hour 40 minutes. Do we want to continue rebuttals or should we go to conclusion? Conclusion can be 2 minutes, or we can continue rebuttals. It will stretch the session. I have no problem in I'm asking your opinion. Yes, so everybody can individually say yes or no whether they want to continue the rebuttals or not. Okay, Swati is saying stretch 1. She is also saying stretch 2. How many other are saying for stretching the session in favor of rebuttals? 2 of them are saying. We have half the vote already. Okay. Friends, you can just say, just unmute and say whether you want to continue the session to rebuttals or we can just conclude.
We can continue. I think stretching
We should continue.
stretching would be more preferable. Yeah.
2 of them are in continue and others. Guys, this is a democracy.
Yes, we should continue.
Okay, 3 for continuing. Advaita, Shirish, Adishri. Okay, so Shirish, should we continue?
Okay, we should continue. I am only asking a question. Can I ask question next?
Okay. Okay, so we will continue. The now rebuttals will be shorter, around 2 minutes. Okay.
Can I ask question?
Yes, within 2 minutes.
Okay, so there are two types of democracies. One is direct democracy and another is indirect democracy. In direct democracy, citizens can directly participate in making major decisions, which is practically not possible in few countries, and in few matters only direct democracy is available. So everyone is everywhere there is indirect democracy in which we choose representatives, and those representatives come into powers and do not fulfill their promises. They always make fake promises. So that's why the debate also is made that democracy is getting flawed, and so I think democracy needs to include meritocracy, as there should be some standard of choosing the representative, and election itself, that indirect democracy where representatives are chosen itself is, there is a book written by a famous author, I forget the name, Election to Election. It means that cost is getting from election to election, where leaders used most of the budget in doing corrupted activities by making by by getting the by making their own votes. I mean, making their own people to vote them in next election, and that is like corruption or nepotism. The cost is mostly the cost is getting to make their own party strong. That system of parties. So the system of parties is also flawed, and the corruption done in election goes for buying the votes, like in it is said in Bengal that Mamata Banerjee buys votes. So this is the main flaw of democracy. So what are the opinions of the people who support it? Thank you.
Thank you, Shirish. Hello, Ozerite. Do you have anything to say? You can just add in 2 minutes. Okay, so Shirish is done. Nihal, you can go in 2 minutes.
I would like to add on to what Advaita said. What she said was true in its sense, okay? But the thing is, the point of this discussion is not to argue whether Indian democracy is terrible. Okay, the thing is that whether democracy is the suitable system for governance. I agree there are problems in Indian democracy, but the thing is, we have a chance for redemption. Democracy is not always permanent in nature. Yes, the current situation is grim. I agree. Prahlad Joshi is the worst choice we can ever make. And it is also into consideration the fact that he's a top RSS leader, and RSS has a very massive hand into private education. So more schools are going to get shut down and everything. So the protest did not lead to anything constructive. And the thing is, no protest will ever lead to any constructive position in India, because the thing is, the position of the people has crumbled. Okay, democracy has three pillars: the opinion of the people, the free press, and third, the opposition. Now, it cannot exist when the government constantly ridicules the opposition and any kind of constructive criticism as anti-national or any other format. Okay, so it is a whole different issue at its other crux. It's a whole different topic, a whole different debate. Okay, what I would ask is to, like she made a very good point with meritocracy. How are we to ensure that it won't get politicized? So I would request a more concerned issue at this point regarding whether there is any other better system at hand than democracy that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Nihal. Yes, go ahead, Advita. 2 minutes.
Okay, so Swasti had mentioned a while ago about arguing that yes, street protests are not at all a failure. She was addressing another point, and that this is an exercise of the people's free speech. And yes, while I do agree that street protests and the like are an excellent use and proof of reassuring the people of their power, I'd say that it's still a bit too susceptible to disruption instead of coming to a constructive solution. People can easily get wrapped up in, say, just mobism or even just barbarism and more violent street protests, especially as the government resorts to things like tear gas in the face of protests. So my main argument against that is things like protests is a double-edged sword. People's right to protest. Because just as it can be used to mobilize people, it can be also used to just create more problems and to manipulate the people's agitation. And as previously mentioned by the previous speaker, of there being three pillars: the opinion of the people, the media and free press, as well as the opposition, it seems like we're severely lacking in things like the free press. It's largely dominated by, say, certain political parties or influence and whatnot. It's difficult, extremely difficult, to find a clear opinion, especially in the age of things like AI generated images and deep fakes and whatnot. Another thing, we keep on hearing comparisons of like North Korea or Iran. My question is, why do we constantly have to compare to countries like North Korea to prove the integrity of a democracy? How come that's the case? If democracy is one of the best options we have, how come we're comparing to situations so much worse? Also, another question was asked, I think, by Venkat, about things like people who haven't worked for 5 years should not be allowed to vote.
Advaita,
Again,
you can continue for the next 20 seconds.
yeah. Again, anything like you shouldn't, you should bar people from voting based on this identity or gender. I'd say any law can easily be manipulated. Once you exclude a group, where does the line of that exclusion grow? Where do the exceptions not end? For example, you can easily manipulate that law, for example, against disabled people, against people like housewives, against the elderly, or perhaps the unemployed. You can keep people intentionally unemployed for long periods of time. Like, for example, we're having an employment crisis amongst newly graduates on finding jobs and employment and such. Okay, I think I'm out of time. Thank you.
But you can summarize what you were saying because it seems your point was good. Like you were saying, disabled and unemployed might be intentionally kept outside the system. You can continue in short. It seems
Yeah.
good.
No, my main point is that we need to focus on where exceptions and exclusions are being made because it's over here in these tiny loopholes that the integrity of our democracy actually degrades. And it's when we start resorting to things like comparing to one of the worst cases in the world to ensure our, to try and prove once again our integrity. Like I'm saying, if we decide on a seemingly good law, like people addicted to drugs should be killed, or perhaps people who are unemployed should not be allowed to vote, you make all of these generalizations maybe based on a moral compass or maybe tradition. But the thing is, it doesn't include for things like disabled people or perhaps housewives or homemakers. What about, say, people who are unemployed because of, say, employment crises in different cities because of the failure of a government or because of some tension? So easily like this, you can manipulate all these exclusionary laws. And similarly, for things like drug addicts deserve to die, what about cases like, for example, people who have been addicted from birth to certain medications? What about medical mismanagement? What about people who have had to self-medicate because they couldn't gain proper medical access? So every failure of the government can be transformed into agitation or into some kind of moral issue. My main point is that we need more informed media and press and less bias and emotion in our proxy. Okay, end of point. I think I've taken too much time.
Yes, Swasti, go ahead, please. 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so I do agree with Advaita. I do agree that there are media biases and that AI deepfakes and a lot of different things that are being the real problem. But you know, there are independent fact checkers as well. You can look at Turkmenistan, where the government completely bans the independent media. You can't even check the facts on website, on Google, nowhere to be found. Also, you asked me a certain question that no, you asked in general that why do we keep comparing to extreme autocracies like North Korea? So I can give the example of Venezuela. So it was one of the wealthiest nation in South America, but as citizens slowly let leaders strip away democratic checks and electoral oversight, the country collapsed into economic ruin and massively. So also, there was a question that Venkat asked me. I think the difference between the British Raj and today is very simple. You couldn't vote the Raj out under colonial rule. Protesting meant facing Jallianwala Bagh that time. So today, protesting is a protected constitutional right to pressurize leaders. I do agree what happened in CP. I come from New Delhi itself. I know how brutal things were there, but I'm talking about in general. You can talk about the farmers' bill and etc. Protest, wherein you were like you had the right to vote. Meanwhile, when we talk about North Korea or places like that, protests get your entire family sent to a labor camp. In India or in a democracy, it's how citizens remind politicians who hold the leash. Also, you talked about literacy and unemployment. You don't need a degree to know your stomach is empty, right? You don't need a degree to know your stomach is empty. In 1977, millions of poor, illiterate Indian voters pulled off a historic feat by voting out an emergency regime. that's my argument to prove you that literacy isn't wisdom. If you want to okay, yeah, if you want to strip the unemployed of their vote, just ensure politicians never create jobs again, because those voters no longer matter. Restricted voting in apartheid South Africa didn't build better governments at all. Shirish mentioned, I guess,
Swati, you will have to give
okay,
your
okay,
name.
I ended here. Yeah, I ended.
So now, Arjun, you can go next.
Yeah, so I want to conclude by saying, like, see, if we see the evolution of politics in our country, the democratic politics in our country, so for the last few years only, people started participating more actively in government, discussing about government policies, opposing policies. They are getting to know about more about the politics. But before that, few decades before, no one knows like what policy they are bringing, what the government is doing, who their MLA is also. No one were aware of that. Now people are more aware of that because of the social media. It just removed the barrier between the politics and the common man. Now if the government implements anything, now they can feel the heat in the social media immediately. Now they are very conscious what kind of steps they need to take. So the problem earlier was people were completely disconnected with the political system of the country. So the leaders at the top, they did whatever they like to do. Now people are also not aware exactly before the elections, if they fund properly, then they are getting vote, then they are getting elected. This is how the system was. Now because of the social media and people getting more educated, so now they are very cautious like what to do. Now they cannot blindly impose anything on the common man. So if it continues, I'm like pretty confident democratic system will become better. Now definitely people will start pointing out, educated population will increase more, and people questioning the policies, people understanding about the impacts of the policies that they are bringing. This will increase. Definitely the cracks in the system will be covered. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Arjun, thank you. I think everybody has presented really very good points. I agree with what Swasti said, that if you don't, exclude the unemployed from the voter base, then the politicians don't have an incentive to focus on the interest of the unemployed. I think that is true to an extent. And so now let's move on to the conclusion. Conclusion will be around 1 minute. You can just max to max take 10 to 15 seconds above it. So yes, Advaita, you can go ahead. If I think it's a conclusion, please keep in 1 minute or 1 2 minute 15 seconds.
Okay. So from this whole topic, I suppose my conclusion would be, it seems that democracy seems to vary from case to case and country to country. And the problem may be more than just whether it's democracy, meritocracy, or whatever other problem. It's clear that factors like education or, say, marginalized groups play major factors, as well as agitation and media. And that the most important thing is ensuring the voice of the people remains strong, ensuring that there is some media and free press, and ensuring that the opposition is also strong. There are quite a few more questions that this still opens up, even if this is conclusion. I still don't understand why we're comparing to the worst cases. I still argue that this maybe allows too much, us to give too much lenience to our own governments to compare constantly to the worst cases in the world. And there are more questions like, does education really correlate with political awareness and correct activism? But I suppose that this may be dependent on X factors well beyond the scope of just ideology and theory. But overall, yeah, it seems like thoroughness and listening to everyone's opinion is a meticulous and rigorous, sometimes monotonous process, but necessary for the well-being of our world. Thank you.
Yes, Swati, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I think that, yeah, I do agree that democracy has lots of flaws, but it's because ruling a powerful country or a diverse country ain't that easy. I do understand the frustration of my opponents over the fact that our media is not being sensible and our leaders are also not being the actual textbook democratic ministers. But I think that when you complain about comparing democracy to North Korea and thinking that the bar is now too low, I believe that it's not too low, it's more of the edge of the cliff. Every brutal dictatorship in history started with people complaining that democracy was too noisy, too slow, or too corrupt, and handling power to experts, a strongman promising shortcut. I do agree that you want a system without protest, political friction, or media noise. If that's what you think, I think it's more of like a graveyard of democracy and your country. So democracy is meant to be messy because free people argue like we are doing right now. This is not possible in autocracy. There it is very quiet because oppressed people are silenced. If you find the noise of a free society annoying, you are looking for a better system. That's it.
Thank you, Swasti. So now I would like to, give my own conclusion. My conclusion is that if you look at history, we can anybody set the timer? Okay, I will set the timer myself. I have set the timer. So my conclusion is that if we go from history, we have gone from dictatorship, monarchy, feudalism to oligarchy, communism, and now we are here in democracy. Democracy, some say is the best form, some say it is not. But I think there are alternatives, hybrids as well, which may be considered. Meritocracy, as Advaita pointed out, has some drawbacks, but maybe we can, combine meritocracy and democracy. And then there is epistocracy, which is that everybody has the right to vote, but educated voters have more political power to vote. Maybe that will work to solve the dilemma is between, uninformed voters making choices, whereas uninformed voters make taking efforts, but their efforts not getting any results. Because ultimately democracy is ruled by the majority. So maybe we can have a hybrid system to solve this dilemma, to overcome the drawbacks of democracy. Maybe we can have deliberative polls, like where citizens are given access to information by experts, so they deliberate over it, and then they make decisions. So yeah, that's my conclusion. Anybody else would like to? Hello friends, anybody else would like to speak, or we can end the session here? Okay, so we can end the session here. It was really, very interesting today. There were so many diverse opinions. Like literally all of you brought something to the table. Great. Okay, bye. I'm ending the meeting for everybody.
Bye. It was
It
nice.
was great
Yeah.
discussing with you.
Yeah, it was really great to discuss with everyone.